Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Laurel Page, and I am the Assistant Director of Events at the University of Colorado Boulder's Lead School of Business. Welcome to our 7th COVID-19 webinar series. These continue to be trying times, and here at CU Boulder, we have gathered our world-renowned faculty and alumni to provide frank and timely insights for life during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today is the 5th of 6 webinars in this COVID-19 related webinar series. To view upcoming webinars, please visit colorado.edu/business/alumni, click the drop-down arrow and click Attend Online Webinars. For today's webinar, we're excited to welcome Jane Miller, here presenting Managing a High-Growth, Better-For-You Snack Company During COVID. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, if you have any questions now or during the presentation that you would like to ask Jane, please send a question through the Q&A interface. We will monitor questions as they are submitted, and Jane will respond to them at the end of the presentation. As a reminder, for optimum audio quality, we do have everyone on mute except for myself and our speaker. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please notify us through the chat interface and one of our support specialists will touch base. Lastly, a link to access the webinar recording will be sent to all registrants tomorrow, along with a survey link and supplemental resources from today's presentation. Now I'm excited to introduce today's speaker. Jane Miller, CEO of Lily's Sweets, is a longtime food industry executive with experience from Fortune 100 companies like PepsiCo and Heinz to natural industry icons like Rudy's Organic Bakery to startups. She is also the founder of a career advice website, janeknows.com, and the author of a sassy business book, Sleep Your Way to the Top and Other Myths About Business Success. She is on the board of the CU Leeds Business School and Watson Institute. Welcome, Jane, and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hand the webinar controls over to you now.
Great, thanks, Laurel. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this virtual lunch. I'm so honored and thrilled to be here. In fact, as you might be able to see, I actually put on real clothes today. So I just want you to make a little bit of note about that. It's so exciting to be here. And this topic is obviously near and dear to all of our hearts. I will kind of give you a spoiler alert up front. A lot of what we have learned during COVID as business leaders are things that will carry with us when COVID is long behind us. And I'll take you through some of the learnings that we've had at Lily's and really how it's changing my leadership style and things that I've learned in the last year that in my 35 plus years as a business leader have never experienced anything quite like this. And again, have just had a ton of learning myself. So what I'm going to do, and probably about the next half an hour, is to start with the story of Lily's, because many of you on the call might not know anything about Lily's or what it's about and what we've done and where we're going. And I'd like to talk a bit about that. And then I'll talk about the positivity of COVID and how that has benefited our business. And then I'll talk about sort of 4 big challenges that we've faced and how we have addressed that. And then, as Laurel said, totally open for as many questions that you have about Lily's, about me, about sort of anything that is of interest to the audience today. So again, thanks for joining. So let me get started. So Lily's is kind of an amazing story. It was founded right around 2011, actually, by an amazing entrepreneur. Her name is Cynthia Tice, based out of the Philadelphia area. She was a long time organic and natural food industry really icon. She'd had one of the first natural food stores in Philadelphia and was someone that was very tuned in to ingredients long before most of the rest of us were. And the thing about Cynthia was she was and is a chocoholic, but was really anti-sugar in so many ways because some of the negative impacts that sugar has on your system. And so she really challenged herself with coming up with a product that both satisfied her sweet tooth, and then at the same time also didn't have any sugar, which is no easy challenge. For anybody on the call that has a sweet tooth, what we know from all of our research is that when you want something sweet, it needs to taste great. and there's no compromises. So there for a long time, there's been products out there that are chocolate that don't have sugar in them, but they just didn't taste good or had something kind of negative for your digestive system. And so Cynthia really cracked the code with being able to create an amazing tasting product. So we go dial the clock all the way back to 2012, where she actually went national with Whole Foods. And for those of you on the call that are in the food business and in the natural food business, what's interesting, and you'll note, is you generally go into one region of Whole Foods and then expand. Very seldom do you get a national rollout. And that was just really said so much about the product and how much the folks at Whole Foods really, really thought that she was onto something big. And so she introduced in 2012 4 candy bar SKUs, and about a year later came out with a baking chip SKU. This is so interesting because this baking chip, if you haven't had it before, until just a couple of years ago, it was the #1 SKU in the whole natural channel for a natural channel being like Whole Foods or Sprouts or Fresh Time, some of those different customers. So we used to laugh and say that she was really sort of the best loved, least known brand, because the people that bought Lily's were just so rabid about it and bought so much of the product that it really propelled the business to success. So she continued along. And at the end of 2017, it was about an $18 million national brand. And it was so interesting because what Cynthia was able to do was to get it to that size with literally herself, an operations person, and her 2 kids who were in their early 20s at that time. So it's just quite an amazing story. But one of the things about Cynthia is not only is she an amazing entrepreneur, but she's also super insightful about herself. And she, at the time, said, you know what, I've had great success here, but I've never run a team before. I don't know really how to scale a business. I think there's a tremendous amount of potential with this brand, but I don't think I can do it myself. And so she found a partner in a private equity firm called VMG based in San Francisco. And I knew them because I had been on the board of Justin's alongside Justin Gold for a number of years. And VMG was an investor in Justin's. And so when they had this opportunity, they reached out to me and said, would you be interested in partnering with us and with Cynthia and seeing what we could do to really build the brand over the next few years? And this is, in my long career, the most amazing story about growth. We've gone from just 3 years ago, $18 million in sales. As you can see here, in 2018, we topped 42 million. 2019, we topped 71 million. Last year, we hit the magic mark of being over 100 million. And right now for 2021, our sights are really set on 150 million or higher. So it's been the kind of growth that most of us can only really dream of in our careers. And as you can see here, a lot of things have happened from that first few years in Whole Foods, where now you can find us in Walmart and Target. And for those of you that are based here in Colorado, you can find us at Natural Grocers and Sprouts and King Soopers and Safeway. So we're in all kinds of customers all across the US. So you may be wondering, like, what was the secret sauce? Like, why is it that this brand, again, there have been sugar-free chocolate brands in the past, like how does something go from 18 million to 150 million in about 3 years? How does that happen? So there's 3 things that I think are really the secret sauce of this business and really has made it happen. The first is we are living in a macro trend now of people trying to cut back on sugar. You know, if you look at the stats, it looks like we eat about 3 times more sugar every day than we're supposed to eat. And from the research that we've done, 8 out of 10 people want to eat less sugar. We did this research before COVID, and then we just did it a couple of months ago to sort of see, has anything changed? And frankly, nothing has changed in terms of people's attitudes, which is, oh my gosh, I really want to cut back on sugar. And this is really, really important to me. But what we continue to see is, even though people want to cut back on sugar, it's really, really hard, because it isn't just about cutting back on sugar. You also want to have that great tasting product. So the first part of our secret sauce is there's a huge macro trend. We actually did a big piece of research. If you follow me on LinkedIn, it's under Jane Knows Business. You can see a study that Mintel just recently did that shows how the low sugar category is growing across every part of the store. So it isn't just in chocolate, it is in really every category that you might shop in. So again, we see that this is being a really big macro trend. So if the macro trend's going on, but people want taste first, what is it about Lily's that has really made a difference? And we are the first company, as I mentioned, to kind of bridge this guilt-free part with the indulgent piece of it. We have really, really high scores on great taste. We actually have the highest repeat of any specialty chocolate. And what that means is once you try the product, you're going to buy it again. A lot of people, and you probably had this experience, will try a product, think you like the idea of it, and they say, I am never going to buy that again. And Lily's is in a really amazing spot, which is when people try it, first of all, they're surprised that it tastes so good, and in such a very, very positive way, which is why we have such high repeat. And so you've got a great tasting product, but you also have a number of things that are very also on trend, being non-GMO, for example, having fair trade chocolate, which is an important part of our story to consumers. And then also, if you look at the lower right hand of my presentation here, just the ingredient deck is so much better than other products that you might say that we would compete with. So big macro trend. The first product that really cracked the code on better for you, but tastes amazing. And then what I'll tell you is the real secret to what's happened to go from 18 million to 150 million. It's about the team and how we run the business. And when I get into the situation we've dealt with COVID, this foundation that we have created allowed us to really excel during the last year. And I think if we would have had a different team or a different outlook on how we do business as a company, I don't think we would have been as successful. So for those of you on the call that are running companies, for those of you that are dreaming of having a company, let me just say that your secret sauce, more than macro trends, more than a great product, is about the people that you surround yourself with to run the business. And I won't go through all the great guys and gals that are on my team, but they're best in class across the board, and would hold our team up against any big company, any place, in terms of the background, the experience, and what we've been able to do. So that's the team. On the other side of it, it really is about how we do business. And many of you are probably familiar with ESG now, which is environmental, social, and governance. And there's a lot of work going on here to evaluate how companies fit into that. So what are your core values as a company, and how does that show up in terms of how you deal with your suppliers, how you deal with your employees, how you deal with other stakeholders, how you deal with your community. And we just recently did an audit in November across the board with an outside third-party firm, and I'm so happy to report that that we had flying colors kind of across the board in terms of how we treat our suppliers, our community, and our employees. So just really, really excited about that. But again, I would say of the three things: macro trend, great tasting product, it really is all about the team. And I think you'll see that come to play when I talk about COVID. So you might be wondering a little bit, well, so what's in our portfolio if you haven't tried our product? As I said, we originally started out with 4 chocolate bars and 1 baking chip. And in the last 3 years, one of the things that we've really done to grow the business is to be on the forefront of innovation. It has been mind-blowing what we have been able to do in the last 3 years. Again, the team is one that is so biased towards action, and the market has been so ripe for new products. So we've gone from milk chocolate and dark chocolate bars to just recently we introduced 3 white chocolate bars. So if you like white chocolate, I think our white chocolate is amazing. We have a cookies and cream, we have a birthday cake, and we have an original white chocolate bar. So we've got a great portfolio of products, everything from 40% milk chocolate to 92% super dark chocolate. So, and kind of everything in between. And you can go on lilies.com and check out what our whole product line looks like. So that was kind of the start of the business, was bars. The next thing that we had was the baking chip. And what's really been fabulous over the last couple of years is the innovation we brought to baking chips. And so we initially started with a dark chocolate. We introduced a milk chocolate and a semi-sweet, and that would be like Nestle's Tollhouse. And basically, since then, I've introduced a bunch of new flavors. We have caramel, we have salted caramel, we have white chocolate, we have a mint, peppermint, we have a butterscotch. And so we've really done, and some seasonal ones like pumpkin spice, and also a regular peppermint. So have done a lot in the baking chip environment. And I'll talk a bit about that in a second, because probably everybody here has been baking a little bit more since last March. In fact, baking chips has been kind of the highest growth category for most of the COVID time in the whole grocery store. So a lot of stuff that's happening there. And then we introduced a number of things that we just call chocolate candy, which is chocolate covered nuts, chocolate covered popcorn, chocolate covered caramels, and peanut butter cups. So we've really had quite a great run. And you can see here, this is just kind of our volume, and you can see how it's built over the last couple of years. Now, what we have on the horizon is something that is even more exciting for everybody. And I'll kind of let you have a little look under the tent on this. We are going to be introducing a line of gummy bears, sour worms, and jelly beans that are also 0 grams of sugar and absolutely taste amazing. And a line of cookies, chocolate chip, white macadamia nut, chocolate chip peanut butter, and also a double chocolate chip, double dark chocolate chip, that are absolutely amazing. And again, no sugar. So it's a super exciting time for the business, because I think as we keep getting into more categories and people can start to expand their repertoire of things that they can get without sugar, it's pretty exciting. So more to come from Lily's. So what's been the positive that's happened during COVID for us? You know, I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm sure many of you are, with household penetration, but you know, that would be the number of households in the country that are actually buying Lily's. And what you can see here is overall, we've got about 5% household penetration in a category that has 96% household penetration. So think about that. That 96% of households have some kind of candy bar in them. And we like to joke that the other 4% have got to be lying, because how is it possible to not have candy bars in your pantry? So 96% of households have candy bars. And what you can see here, I just put a little line on my chart of what happened when COVID hit in March, and you can see what's happened with our household penetration, is that during that time, we've seen baking chips household penetration double, and we've seen total household penetrations be up by about 2/3. And this is great for a brand like us, because for all the success that we're having building distribution and growing the business, we have a huge opportunity to get into a lot more households. So when we look back at the year of COVID, on one front, we feel very blessed because people had the opportunity to experience more about Lily's and bring that into their home. You know, one little kind of trivia thing for those of you that haven't tried Lily's but do love to bake, if you do a recipe with Nestle's Tollhouse and a recipe with Lily's, and the only thing you change is Lily's versus Nestle's Tollhouse. So you keep the sugar, you keep the brown sugar, you keep butter, you keep everything the same except for the chips. You'll save 100 grams of sugar in that batch of cookies. So maybe think about that the next time you're making something for your family. It's a super easy swap that you can do that really is not going to have any impact on the deliciousness of the cookies. And in fact, you'll feel so much better about having less sugar. So that's the positive of COVID. What have been the challenges that we have been faced with, which was really the purpose of the webinar today, was to kind of share what we've experienced and what we've done about it. And you know, we really have 4 buckets that I'd like to talk about. The first is the impact on supply chain, and what was happening in the industry, and then what we were able to do to keep supply going. I will tell you, in an environment of a lot of moving parts in the last year, we've had over 99.5% case fill to our customers, which is really an industry standard to have that. And so I'll talk a little bit about why we've been successful there. What's happened with customers during this time, and customers would be like our Walmart or Target or Whole Foods, natural grocer. So what's happening with our interactions with them in this new world? I'll talk about consumers because it's been a big change about how we get people to try our products, and what it's done from our marketing spending. And then finally, I'll talk about our employee engagement because I think personally, this has been the biggest area of personal growth that I've had in the last year is what do you do in the environment that we're in to have people feel like they're part of something that's bigger and something that they have control of versus being out of control, which I know many of us have felt during COVID. So let me start with supply chain. This is, kind of a typical little track that you would see, but I'll just kind of give you an overview of how our product works. We source fair trade cocoa from Africa. We have a supplier that does that for us. And then to get cocoa to taste great and have low sugar, they have a little secret sauce that we put together at our key supplier, and that ends up into some sort of form like either baking chips, as I'm representing here, or a big blocks of chocolate that will be melted into candy bars or used for chocolate covered nuts or peanut butter cups. At our co-manufacturers, in this particular case, they would take the baking chips and put it in a bag. And this particular bag is our stand-up pouch that we have exclusively for Walmart. And then it would go through a distributor. In most cases, we do have some customers where we go direct, but given the size of our business still, although it's exciting to be on the verge of 150 million, we're still kind of a relatively small food company. And so we go through third-party distributors and then get it on the retail shelves where you'll have a chance to buy it. So let me kind of break this down on what's happened over the last year. So what's been really interesting is, when we get the cocoa beans and the other ingredients and they're at the factory to be made into blocks of chocolate or into baking chips, what we have found in the COVID environment is the hardest thing has been to keep people showing up for work. That the consistency of being able to have all the shifts running have been very, very difficult for our particular supplier of chocolate. And it's kind of been a range of things. Obviously, there's very, very significant protocols at all of our manufacturers, excuse me, to make sure that nobody is showing up to work with any kind of a positive read. And so, anyone who has been exposed to COVID, anyone who comes and has a temperature check and it's above the targeted amount gets turned away. And so, in the course of the last year, that has been quite a strain on our manufacturers, on both our supplier and our manufacturers. I'll talk about in a second. So, overall testing for COVID has really had an impact on the workplace. Childcare has been a huge issue. And, some of you on the call may have experienced this, where with daycares and schools also closing down, a lot of parents where both of them worked, somebody had to stay home with the kids. And so it's really had a big impact on manufacturing workforces where childcare was not available and people had to stay home. And unlike my job, which I've been able to do from my house for the last year, you can't be on the end of a chocolate line and do that from your living room. And so the childcare impact has been huge. And what we first experienced last summer was that a lot of people that were getting unemployment checks actually preferred to not go into work during that time because they were actually making quite a bit of money that way. And I think in some ways felt much more safe being at home versus going into the workplace. So our key chocolate manufacturer, their biggest problem has been staffing over the last year and keep that running. What's most fascinating to me is we actually have been in a worse situation in January than we were in April of last year. You'd almost sort of think in some ways that after almost a year in COVID, that we would not be in the same situation, but with sort of the setbacks that we've had kind of over the holidays, it hit us super, super hard in January. And so I would just say that we are really blessed with an amazing partner here who has really helped make sure that we get all the chocolate that we need, even when they're managing very, very difficult schedules. The second piece of it is very similar. So again, this would be getting the chocolate and putting it into bags, or in some cases, getting the chocolate blocks and putting it into chocolate bars, we had the same issues here that we did with our chocolate supplier in terms of people not showing up for shifts. Again, that was sort of the biggest issue that we had. In fact, one of our most fabulous partners, who's based in California, actually had to shut their whole facility down for 2 weeks because they had 3 positives. Didn't get into the factory, but it was identified before, but it actually hit a hurdle in California where you could not, you had to shut down the facility. So again, I'm just so proud of our partners because they've just been diligent at making sure that their employees are super safe and that all of our food products are super safe too. The other issue that came here that was different than with our chocolate supplier was really this, what you've probably seen across the board and in your own eating habits, is the food business has been crazy the last year. I mean, there are brands that haven't grown in years that have grown more in the last year. I mean, our two biggest competitors are Lindt and Ghirardelli. They're full sugar chocolate bars, but they're our biggest competitors. And those brands, if you looked at data through February of last year, hadn't grown in a couple of years. And since COVID, people are buying chocolate candy like crazy, including Lily's. And so one of the things that we were really faced with is with this uptick in demand across the board, not just for Lily's, but for our competitors. We don't own any of our own manufacturing, and so we have to share line time with other companies. And so one of the big dilemmas with this full-on growth really was how our co-mans were able to manage that. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second about what we did. And then from a distributor standpoint, this was the craziest thing, which was when it first hit. So imagine a distributor gets our product and they're also getting Purell and they're getting wipes and they're getting sanitary stuff, and it's all going on the same truck to a retailer. And during the early days of COVID, you couldn't get, you couldn't even get on a truck because there was so much happening in terms of trying to get all the supplies that people were wiping out of the stores. So that was an issue early on. Now, the craziest thing that's happening in the last 6 months has been the rise of e-commerce, where we're all getting so much more stuff delivered to our doors. And that has really resulted in a national shortage of trucks. And so when we think about trying to get the product from our distributors to our retailers, in a lot of cases, we're dealing with a very high demand, and hopefully supply will catch up. But in the short term, it's been one of the biggest challenges. So staffing issues, prioritization issues, and in this case, truck issues. So what have we done, and what's the advice I would have for anyone here who's running a company or starting a company? The relationships that we had going into COVID were so strong that it allowed us to weather the COVID storm from a supply chain standpoint. My senior vice president of operations is a longtime industry executive, Phil Mason. And he had done such an amazing job in the 2 years we worked together before COVID to really be able to develop strong relationships with the co-mans, that by the time this happened, we were not on the bottom of their list. We were on the top of their list in terms of people they wanted to do business with. And so we had done a lot of top to tops over the last couple of years. So I would get on, and we'd meet in person, of course, back in the day. Go to the factories, meet employees, meet the senior management, tell them about our business plans, get them excited about it. Phil is on the phone every day with a real human touch to talk to everyone that's in leadership at all of our co-mans. We've done a lot of fun things like t-shirts and hats. And so you have kind of a Lily's tribe at many of our co-mans. So a lot of day-to-day communication. We also, as a team, are continually updating our forecast. When you're growing this fast and it's changing so fast, it really requires a lot of attention to new distribution wins, what that means, what's happening with velocity. So we have a team that's focused on that all the time. And then my chief operating officer, who has got the whole customer service team, has done an amazing job of managing inventory. And so I have on here as a note for you is like, don't cry wolf. It's like, be honest about what you need. Don't try to just be stockpiling stuff because you want to get ahead of the next guy, but really be very transparent with your forecasts and what you're doing, so that your co-mans know that you're being straightforward with them, and then they'll meet your needs. So you'll see this theme throughout my presentation, but it really is about communication. So that's the supply chain. From a customer standpoint, this is kind of a fascinating chart, which just shows kind of through June to give you a sense, but this is store traffic versus year ago at 4 of our biggest customers. So it's Walmart, Whole Foods, Kroger, and Target. And what you can see starting at the end of March of 2020 is store traffic was down dramatically across the board for all of our key customers. And if you were to look at Costco, any other customers, it was very, very similar. And it may have felt the same to you at the time, which is you were reticent about going into a store. And if you went in, you probably do a huge grocery shop, so you wouldn't have to go back in again anytime soon. And so this was a huge impact on our retailers at the start of COVID. Now, I'll talk about this in a second because it had big implications for us in terms of how we deal with our retailers. The other thing is we've gone from the picture on the left, which is in August of 2019. My team and I had the chance to have a top-to-top in Bentonville with the Walmart senior team. Kind of a life-changing experience for the little company called Lily's to get to be in Walmart headquarters and meet with them. And that was really amazing. And today we're doing everything like this on Zoom. And that has kind of big implications on how you talk to people and how you approach them. So for us, from a customer standpoint, the biggest thing was seeing what was happening in their world. And then the second is how do we need to adapt our communication style for the new world? And so we just kind of a couple of key tips here. The first one is understanding that there were big dynamics for retailers. Foot traffic was down. As I mentioned, we had a lot of promotions canceled. They weren't going to do hot deals on things, put them up on end caps when they needed to focus on, again, Purell and wipes and other things that customers needed right away. And their priorities really, really shifted. And so being sensitive about that, as opposed to like, hey, we're Lily's, like talk to us, was really, really important to kind of get that right balance. And so, we kind of step back, and my chief customer officer uses this term, which I love, which is like, don't be a muddy puppy. And what's a muddy puppy? We all love puppies, but the muddy puppy is the one that is bothering you. The muddy puppy is the one that's jumping on you and annoying you, as opposed to just being cute. And so we really, as a group, talked a lot about let's not be muddy puppies with our customers. Let's make sure that that we're very respectful of what they're going through and being really responsive to the times. What it really forced us to do, and we were doing this already, but I think it allowed us to kind of have a little bit more time and take a deeper level in terms of insights that would help our customers grow the business and providing them real value added insights. And then, it became very personal in some ways. I have been on calls with buyers where, their kids jumping on their lap, the dog is barking in the background, and here you're trying to have this super professional presentation. And all of a sudden, like, life goes on around us. And this has kind of been a recurring theme for us, both with customers and with our employees about, I think there's been a level of personal getting to know each other that we didn't really know before. But like the supply chain, communicate. The third thing was how we, connected with consumers. The number one way that we were getting people to try Lily's was to actually have it out there for them to try. And because once you tried it, as I said before, we have the highest repeat, and you buy it again, and who doesn't want to try a free sample? So this was one of our sort of major initiatives, was always doing sampling all the time and getting people to try the product. So what we've done in the last year is really changed our tactics, because as you know, there's no live sampling. And frankly, it's kind of funny. I'm not sure if it'll ever come back where you'll cut up candy bars in a grocery store and hand them out. Even if you have on a hairnet and gloves, there's something, I think, that we're maybe all a little bit more cautious about the products that we receive and that we eat. But what we've done is really put a lot from a marketing standpoint on e-com. Our Amazon, Lilies.com, and Thrive business was not that big last year, and it's really grown dramatically. I think I did a review this morning. I think it's like 800 times what it was a year ago or something insane like that. So we've really focused a lot on e-com. A couple examples here, we actually are doing a big national freestanding insert, or FSI, which we've never done before, to get people to try the product. And that'll be happening on March 7th. And then we've hired some number of wonderful organizations that go into grocery stores and help build displays so that when people are shopping, they can see the product a little bit more readily. So we've done a lot with that. And then on the picture on the right, I don't know if you are Mean Girls fans, but Jonathan Bennett was a star of Mean Girls, and he just hosted a cooking class for us right before Valentine's Day. This is his fiance, James, and used all Lily's products. And we had different members of the media that were there. And we have been featured now in everything from People Magazine to Us Weekly and about every other different magazine, online and otherwise in between, which has been absolutely great in terms of getting exposure for the business overall. So kind of our tactics have gone from getting people to taste the product live to reaching them online, trying to hit them in the face in store with like a big display like this, reach out to them in different ways, either via PR, like with Jonathan, or on FSIs. And then the final thing I'll talk about is employee engagement. You know, this goes without saying, I guess, but it sets up what we've done and what I have talked to you a little bit about what I've learned. This has been a scary year. And I think, you know, when COVID first hit, there was so much uncertainty, so much unemployment, so much fear about illness, and so many people that were isolated, that were used to coming into an office or traveling for business, that all of a sudden were at home. And there was so many dynamics that were super, super scary. And I think, you know, we're still dealing with it today, almost a year later. But what we've done as a company is just a number of things that maybe there will be some tips here that you can use with your organizations that we've used to kind of engage people. When we started out, I started to do with COVID, a weekly town hall, and we would get everybody, as shown in this picture here, on Zoom. And we would talk about what was happening with the business. We actually had everybody, every week, we would have 3 or 4 different people talk about their home life and what they had going on, and just sort of share personal stories of life in COVID. And it was extraordinary. And it was, for me, having done this for a long time, you know, I didn't realize how isolated people that are not in the home office could actually be. I mean, I did town halls as the Lilly CEO before COVID about once a quarter. And when we started in COVID, we started doing them once a week. And I almost felt like I had been irresponsible in terms of the people that weren't in the office, in terms of them keeping up with the business. Now, what we realized pretty quickly was once a week was probably more than we needed to do after we'd been into it for a couple of months. And now we do it about once a month. But that communication has been really, really critical. Likewise, I show you here, I send out at the time, I sent out a daily email, again, just trying to keep everybody connected and feeling like they knew what was going on with the business, feeling assured that they weren't going to lose their job, that the company was strong, and that we would continue. And so was doing daily emails, and now I'm down to weekly emails. So, you know, weekly town halls and daily emails, now monthly town halls and weekly emails. We did a lot of fun things with gift cards, you know, support your local restaurant, buy something, you know, online to support a bookstore. And so a lot of things like that. I love this little snail mail thing. I don't know if anybody still does this or not, but one of the things that I found to be most impactful during COVID has been when I've written personal notes to people on the team. You know, most of us don't even check our mail that much, and you don't get, maybe from your grandma or something, get a card that's actually handwritten. And I found that that was a super powerful way to communicate to people and let them know that we really cared. And then finally, we launched something called Lily's University. And the whole idea was that we would begin to provide training for all of our people. So again, we could be more connected. Our first 4-session class was on embracing change, which was in August, which seemed very appropriate for our organization. We followed that up with the YWCA's training on how to be an anti-racist. And we've had 4 of those sections, and it's just been extraordinary if you have a chance to check into their programming. And then we've got some other personal development things. So, really trying to make sure that people felt like they were part of something bigger, that they weren't alone, even though they may have been alone at their homes. So key learning, as I've said across the board, communicate, communicate, communicate. Really make it personal. I think when times are really difficult, all of us want to belong, whether it is a customer, whether it is one of our co-mans, whether it's an employee, and even making that personal connection with consumers. Our marketing team does a great job of anyone who direct messages us, we respond to them. Any kind of post that we get, we tag and we respond to. So again, sort of feeling like you're a part of something bigger. And then again, as I said, I've been doing this for a long time. So I would just say, just challenge yourself to keep learning and realize that, that you can have an environment like this really make a difference. So my last slide before we go into Q&A is for those of you that are students of history, Winston Churchill from World War II, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, had an amazing saying that I've used in the last year, which is never let a good crisis go to waste. And that really has been our mantra, which is let's take advantage of what's happening out there in the world that we don't control and control what we do control. So with that, I think we've got about 20 more minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to field them.
Thank you so much, Jane. As a reminder, if you do have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A interface. And we also will be sending out a recording from today tomorrow to all attendees. Jane, our first question comes from Amy. How have the differing regulatory requirements impacted your business?
Gosh, I probably need to be a little bit more specific about that, if that's regulatory during COVID or...
During COVID, yes, sorry.
During COVID. What's been I guess, the regulations haven't changed, I would say, in terms of our business, but what I think has become more apparent is sort of the importance of food safety, employee safety, and how we manage that. So I think that that's probably been the trickiest thing, because there really haven't been big rules that have changed in terms of regulatory or how we manage our business, but it's been much more about how our business gets managed, specifically at our supplier and co-man level.
Great, thank you, Jane. Our next question comes from Chris. It starts with, love the free trade sourcing. What other sustainability initiatives does Lily's currently have, and any further future plans?
So yes, we've got fair trade, of course, that we have. We actually have a big forestry sustainable initiative for all of our cardboard, which is all recyclable, which is a big part of our products are in packages that are in caddies, which are in cases, which are in master cases. And so a lot of cardboard is really in our system. So we actually have a huge initiative going on there. We're actually working on trying to get to that next generation of packaging that is totally recyclable. I mean, a lot of our products have pouches that you can open up and pull the product out, and those particular items are not recyclable. And it is a huge initiative that we're working with some of our biggest packaging manufacturers to see where we go next. The tricky thing today is that so many of these great packaging alternatives, they exist, they're just so much more expensive. And what we don't want to do is pass on the cost to our consumers. So it really is one of these things. I was just on a big sustainability call about 3 weeks ago with the head of Amazon Sustainability and the Fair Trade Association. And what I was, was sort of imploring the audience, which was a lot of big companies that were on there, which was, oh my gosh, we need the big companies to make inroads in sustainability so the little companies can kind of jump on the bandwagon, as opposed to us providing all the leadership there. So I think there's a lot of work that is going on. And of course, all of our products are non-GMO too. So we have a sustainability aspect to that. So it's always top of mind In some cases, we're not able to deliver on all of our products like packaging, but we continue to learn and continue to get better and continue to strive to have that be an important part of our DNA.
Thank you, Jane. Our next question is, where do you recruit for your team members? Direct sourcing, LinkedIn, campus recruiting fairs, referrals, job boards, etc.
So, we've been pretty blessed for the most part that it's kind of been our own networks that we've been able to recruit from. So my first team, when I talked about the dream team up front, everybody that reports into me directly came through our network. And then beyond that, more people that came through the network. Having said that, we've posted a number of jobs on LinkedIn. We have used some local recruiters. Of course, we're a big fan of Luke Vernon and Luke Circle, and all of our jobs go up there. So we love Luke and what he's done here on the Front Range of Colorado. So it's kind of been it's sort of been multi-phase. I would say the main thing has really been through networks, which is why it's so important for everyone on this call to network with your CU alums. Because the best way to get a job is to know someone that can make a warm introduction, as opposed to someone just submitting a resume and not knowing that you are friends with Jane Miller or Laurel Page or whomever. So I think that's just a really important thing to do, is network all the time, not just when you're looking for a job, because when you're looking for a job, if you already have the network, it'll be a lot easier.
Thank you, Jane. Our next question is Lily's available in the warehouse stores like Costco or Sam's Club? And if not, are there plans to sell there?
Oh, that's a great question. We're in BJ's. If you're in the Northeast, you can get us in BJ's. We have peanut butter cups there, and we also have a new 4-pack of our best-selling item, which is salted caramel milk chocolate. We have our baking chips in Costco Northeast right now, and we're trying to just kind of monitor it and see how it goes. I mean, so far it's been a pretty big success. I mean, my dream would be next year we would be national in Costco and in Sam's, and also obviously we're in BJ's, so that would be our dream. We are working towards that, but if you're familiar with those businesses, they take a lot of volume, and we're already a pretty fast growing company. So what we always want to try to do is not overpromise and underdeliver. So we've been really cautious with the club stores, just because they do create a big kind of drain on a smaller company's resources.
Great, thank you, Jane. Our next question comes from Erin regarding employee engagement. I heard from a colleague yesterday saying, I am so tired. We are operating at max capacity. They're a very similar growth and position as your business. How would you recommend helping this employee to recover while still satisfying external and internal customer demands?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question, because I do know our team has felt that so personally, about feeling like you're just working so hard, and that the pace doesn't really slow down to some degree. And so I would say a couple of things, which is one, really making sure that you are taking time off. We have unlimited PTO at Lily's. But I think in a lot of cases, because it's unlimited, people don't take it as much as if they had 2 weeks of vacation or 3 weeks of vacation. And I think it's really trying in the organization to sort of say the best way for you to have the energy and enthusiasm to be excited about a fast-paced job is to also know that you need time off, and know what kind of fills your cup and makes you feel, good about yourself, sort of to get re-energized. The other thing is, a lot of times what I find in fast-paced companies is it's important to prioritize. What I see, especially with some of our more junior members of the team, is that everything kind of hits at the same intensity. And so sometimes you feel like this one thing you have to do, and this thing you have to do, where if you really just sat down with your boss or your boss's boss and whatever your organization structure is, and say, let's be really clear on priorities, because not everything always needs to be done at the same pace. And I know I am probably one of the worst leaders in that sense, because I get so excited about everything. And I think that, and so I have such an amazing team that wants to do everything. And, we had a great example today. It actually goes back to the club question. I wanted to go aggressively against a big initiative at one of the big clubs. And my team that reports to me just said, Jane, we no, we can't do it. We need to be more cautious about this. And I think having the courage to say that, because a lot of times when you're in my position or senior leadership, you don't really understand all the ramifications of what everybody's doing. So I guess, so kind of two answers to that question, Erin. The first one is making sure you find time for yourself, or the friend that you're talking about. And then on the other hand is making sure that you're transparent with your management about what your priorities are and making sure you're aligned against them to have the right expectations.
Thank you, Jane. We're going to move into our final three questions. Our first question is, with variances and changes in supply chain, what is your process and standards for selecting suppliers for ingredients?
So we have, as I mentioned, Phil Mason, who is our key head of operations. We have a pretty diligent internal scorecard of products. So they have to be non-GMO, they have to be certified kosher. There's kind of a list. They have to be approved by Whole Foods in terms of, products and countries that you can source from. So kind of when you start there with a pretty stringent list of ingredients you can use, it eliminates a lot of suppliers. And then generally what we do is we work closely with our co-mans and who are their trusted suppliers. And then in like most companies, I'm sure would do an RFP, which is a request for a proposal, where we would get it narrowed down to a number of great companies, and then send out and sort of say, these are the specs that we want, and then get costs back and timelines and quality and all that. So it's a fairly disciplined process from sort of screening out to then running a rigorous RFP process to make sure that we're getting not just the best quality products, but also the best pricing.
Great, thank you, Jane. Our next question is from Erin. How is it going with Walmart and other suppliers' vendor compliance? Are you meeting requirements and avoiding chargebacks or struggling with losses due to deductions?
I have got the most amazing customer service team underneath my chief operations officer. And she also has the deductions team under there. And those guys are like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. They don't let anything go by. So I would say we've been very blessed in that we are very meticulous up front about making sure that all of our products meet the requirements of a big customer like Walmart. Who, by the way, Walmart just became our #1 customer last year. It had been Whole Foods for the previous 8 years of the company's history. So it's a big customer for us, and it's important that we do it right. So I would say that we have, one, we get it all set up right. And then two, we have a meticulous team that follows up on any deductions, so that we make sure that if we've had misships, if there's any issues in the supply chain, that we identify them quickly, and dispute them if they're not real, or if it was our fault and it was something that we should have been charged for, make sure it doesn't happen again. So it takes a lot of rigor. And I think Lana Borden's our chief operations officer, and she's had great experience. And from the very start, when we got started 3 years ago, set up the processes in place immediately while we were a much smaller company that allows us to be successful as a much bigger company.
Thank you, Jane. Our last question is, how do you maintain professional relationships in this electronic world?
In some ways, it's such a great question. In some ways, it's easier, just from the standpoint that you can get on people's calendars on a lot. Nobody's going anywhere. We're not jumping on planes. We're not, traveling. And I've actually found that it's been actually has been one of the benefits, although I'm sure like everybody on this call, I'm a little zoomed out to some degree, and wish we were having meetings in person more. But I have found that people are more accessible in this way, that you can actually get 15 minutes on somebody's calendar that maybe you wouldn't have been able to before, because they aren't traveling because they actually, have a little bit more free time and have actually even maybe been even more retrospective themselves about the importance of networks. So I would say, use it to your advantage. I mean, if you are networking and trying to build a network, always remember to be super respectful about people's time and to be very specific about questions that you want to ask. I mean, I am really open to meeting with people all the time because my side project is career advice and helping people kind of develop their leadership style, which is what I love when I'm not running Lily's. But it's really a lot more helpful for me if somebody says, "Hey Jane, I have a specific question for you about X, Y, and Z that I'd like to talk to you about." To me, that feels so much less daunting than, "Jane, can I have an hour of your time just to talk about myself?" And so just think about who your audience is, maybe what you want to know. A friend of mine calls this the 5-minute favor, which is if you just basically say, "Hey Jane, I have one question I want to ask you and it's going to take 5 minutes." It's hard for most people to turn that down. And if they do, then you probably didn't want to talk to them anyway. So I would just say, take advantage of Zoom while we have it, because I do think people are more accessible than they've ever been before.
Thank you, Jane. And thanks so much for everyone for joining us for today's presentation. And once again, thank you, Jane, for all of this great information. At this time, we invite you to provide your feedback on the webinar by answering the following poll question. On a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this webinar to a friend or other CU Boulder alumni? We thank you in advance for submitting your feedback. As a reminder, all webinar attendees will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording of this presentation as well as a survey. To view upcoming webinars as well as previous recordings, please visit our website at www.colorado.edu/business/alumni. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is Friday, as Jessica Brown and Barbara Grandjean present on COVID-19 hot topics for employers in 2021. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for your time, and go Buffs.